You thought your soulmate didn't love you. The truth will shock you. Stop scrolling, because the silence you have been trying to understand may not mean what you think it means. My beloved child, you thought your soulmate didn't love you. You looked at the distance, the unanswered messages, the moments when they seemed emotionally unavailable, and you quietly told yourself that maybe the connection only mattered to you. But listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. What looked like rejection may have been a person fighting feelings they did not know how to handle. They tried to convince themselves that the connection was temporary. They told themselves they could simply move forward, stay busy, and eventually forget the way you made them feel. Yet every time they tried to close that emotional door, something brought you back into their thoughts. A familiar song. A random memory. A place that reminded them of you. A dream they could not explain. Even ordinary moments started carrying your energy. And slowly, the question they had been avoiding became impossible to silence. Why does this person still affect me so deeply? My beloved child, this message is for you because the truth is not simply that they remembered you. The truth is that remembering you began awakening something inside them they had spent years trying not to feel. Listen closely, because what happened inside your soulmate was much deeper than a simple change of heart. They began realizing that being around you made them feel seen in a way they were not prepared for. You noticed things about them other people overlooked. You may have understood their silence before they explained it. You may have sensed when something was wrong even while they smiled and said everything was fine. That kind of connection can feel beautiful, but to someone carrying old emotional wounds, it can also feel terrifying. Your soulmate may have learned long ago that getting close to someone means giving that person the power to hurt them. So when they began feeling safe with you, an old instinct told them to run. Not because you were dangerous, but because vulnerability felt dangerous. Don't scroll. This is important. The closer they felt to you, the more their hidden fears started surfacing. Fear of rejection. Fear of abandonment. Fear of losing control. Fear that if they allowed themselves to love you completely, you might one day leave and take a piece of their heart with you. So instead of saying, "I'm scared because you matter to me," they created distance. And you interpreted that distance as a lack of love. But here is where the energy around this connection begins to change. Something has happened recently inside their emotional world. Maybe no one around them noticed it. Maybe they did not even understand it immediately. But there came a moment when your absence stopped feeling peaceful and started feeling heavy. They had believed distance would give them clarity. Instead, distance showed them exactly how much space you occupied in their heart. My beloved child, your heart needs this right now. They began missing things they never expected to miss. The sound of your voice. The way you responded when they opened up. The comfort of knowing you were there. The strange calm they felt when they were speaking to you, even about ordinary things. And suddenly they had to confront something uncomfortable. Perhaps the connection was not confusing because it was meaningless. Perhaps it was confusing because it was meaningful enough to expose parts of themselves they had never healed. That realization became the beginning of their spiritual awakening. They started looking inward. They started questioning their own patterns. They started wondering whether the person they were protecting themselves from was actually you, or whether they were protecting themselves from memories that had nothing to do with you at all. Don't dismiss the signs you have been noticing, because they may be inviting you to pay attention to your own awakening too. Maybe 1111 keeps appearing when this person crosses your mind. Maybe you notice 222 when you are questioning whether you should keep faith or release the outcome. Perhaps 333 seems to appear during moments when you need courage, or 444 shows up when your heart needs stability. Maybe 555 keeps catching your attention while everything around you feels uncertain. Listen to this. Repeating numbers do not have to guarantee that someone is returning tomorrow to be meaningful. Sometimes they become reminders to check in with yourself. What are you learning? How are you changing? Are you becoming stronger, clearer, more emotionally grounded? My beloved child, this message is for you because your journey is not only about whether your soulmate finally understands their feelings. Your journey is also about recognizing the kind of love you deserve. You are awakening to the truth that chemistry without consistency can exhaust the heart. Connection without communication can create confusion. Feelings hidden forever cannot build the relationship you desire. And the universe may be guiding you toward a version of love where you no longer have to constantly wonder where you stand. Here is the revelation your soulmate was not prepared to face: you were beginning to change while they were still hiding. For a long time, they may have assumed that you would always remain emotionally available. They believed there would always be another opportunity to reach out, another chance to explain themselves, another moment when you would still be waiting for clarity. But something about your energy began shifting. Maybe you became quieter. Maybe you stopped chasing answers. Maybe you stopped trying to convince them that the connection was real. Maybe you simply began investing more of your attention back into yourself. And your soulmate felt that shift. They may not have had words for it, but something inside them noticed that you were no longer standing exactly where they left you. Don't scroll, because this is where fear began changing sides. Before, they were afraid of getting too close to you. Now, they are beginning to feel afraid that they may have stayed distant for too long. They have started wondering whether someone else will eventually recognize the love, loyalty, tenderness, and depth they were too frightened to honor. Your heart needs this right now. Their regret is not your responsibility to fix. My beloved child, you can understand why someone became afraid without excusing everything that fear caused. You can recognize that they may have cared while still acknowledging that their silence hurt you. Spiritual love does not mean abandoning your standards. Divine timing does not mean putting your entire life on hold while another person decides whether they are ready to be honest. This message is not asking you to chase them. It is asking you to remain open to truth while standing firmly in your worth. If this person comes toward you, let their actions speak. If they say they missed you, notice whether they also acknowledge how their distance affected you. If they say they were afraid, notice whether they are now willing to communicate through that fear instead of disappearing again. If they say they love you, notice whether that love creates peace or sends you back into another cycle of confusion. Listen to this carefully. Genuine spiritual connection should ultimately lead toward greater honesty, not endless guessing. Something else is happening behind the scenes emotionally, and this is where the story becomes more intense. Your soulmate has been replaying certain moments between you. A conversation they once brushed aside now feels important. Something you said months ago suddenly makes sense. A look you gave them carries a meaning they did not understand at the time. They remember occasions when you gave them an opportunity to speak honestly and they changed the subject. They remember times when they could have reassured you but allowed pride or fear to win. They may even remember a moment when they saw disappointment in your face and still did not know how to respond. My beloved child, those memories are returning differently now because they are seeing the connection from your side. For the first time, they may be asking themselves, what did my silence make them believe about themselves? That question carries weight. Because your soulmate is realizing that while they were trying to protect their heart, they may have unintentionally wounded yours. And once someone sees that clearly, it becomes difficult to go back to pretending nothing happened. Pay attention, because the next realization is the one that truly shook them. They began comparing how they felt around you with how they feel around other people. Not necessarily romantically, simply emotionally. They noticed that certain conversations felt surface level after experiencing the depth they felt with you. They noticed how rare it was to feel understood without explaining everything. They may have met new people, spent time with friends, surrounded themselves with activity, and still discovered that distraction could not recreate connection. This does not mean no one else could ever matter to them. It means you left an emotional imprint that they had underestimated. Don't scroll. Somewhere in that comparison, your soulmate had a startling thought. What if I pushed away something I was actually praying for because I was too afraid to recognize it? That thought unsettled them. Because suddenly the story they had been telling themselves, that the connection was too complicated, too intense, too uncertain, began falling apart. The complication may not have been the connection itself. The complication may have been their own inability to trust what they felt. My beloved child, the universe may be using this entire chapter to teach both of you a different lesson. Your soulmate is learning that avoiding emotion does not create freedom. You are learning that loving deeply does not require losing yourself. They are learning that silence has consequences. You are learning that your worth remains intact even when someone fails to communicate it back to you. They are learning that vulnerability is not weakness. You are learning that patience does not mean accepting emotional inconsistency forever. This message is for you because your spiritual awakening is becoming more mature. Perhaps at the beginning of this journey, you looked for every sign as proof that this person would return. Now the universe may be inviting you to ask a deeper question: what is this connection awakening in me? That is where your power lives. Angel numbers, dreams, synchronicities, and intuitive moments can inspire reflection, but your destiny is not controlled by signs. Your choices matter. Their choices matter. The future is shaped by honesty, courage, growth, and the willingness to meet each other in reality rather than fantasy. And now comes the moment your soulmate has been trying hardest to avoid. They are beginning to imagine what life would truly feel like if you moved on. Not temporarily. Not as a way to make them jealous. Truly moved on. They picture you laughing freely again. They picture someone else listening to your stories, appreciating your heart, showing up consistently, and giving you the clarity they were too afraid to give. And that image has created an emotional reaction they were not prepared for. Maybe it felt like jealousy. Maybe sadness. Maybe panic. Maybe a sudden realization that the door they assumed would always be open could eventually close. Listen to this. That reaction revealed something important to them. Their feelings were never as casual as they pretended. The possibility of losing you permanently forced them to confront what temporary distance allowed them to avoid. They care. They care enough that the thought of your life continuing without them makes them question every choice that created the distance in the first place. But don't confuse their awakening with your obligation to wait. My beloved child, your destiny is still moving. You do not need to freeze your life until another person finds courage. Keep becoming. Keep healing. Keep building a life that feels peaceful whether this soulmate returns or not. This is where the energy changes completely, because when you stop chasing an outcome, you become able to receive the truth without being controlled by it. If they step forward, you can listen without abandoning your boundaries. If they remain silent, you can continue moving without believing their silence defines your worth. Your heart needs this right now. Someone else's emotional readiness is not a measurement of your lovability. You were worthy before they understood you. You remain worthy if they never become brave enough to say what they feel. And strangely, your willingness to finally understand that may be what makes this next chapter unavoidable for them. Listen carefully, because there is one secret beneath all of this that they have not admitted, not even fully to themselves. There was a specific moment when your soulmate realized their feelings had crossed a line they could no longer call casual. Something happened. Maybe you looked at them in a certain way. Maybe you offered kindness during a moment when they felt emotionally exposed. Maybe you walked away from a conversation, and the thought of losing you suddenly felt unbearable. Whatever the moment was, something inside them whispered, "This person matters to me." And instead of moving closer, they panicked. That may have been exactly when you noticed them becoming more distant. My beloved child, think about that for a moment. You may have believed they pulled away because their feelings disappeared, when their withdrawal may have started precisely because their feelings became stronger than they knew how to manage. Don't scroll, because this is the truth that changes the meaning of everything that happened afterward. The next chapter begins with a choice they can no longer avoid. Your soulmate can continue hiding behind silence and risk watching you move into a life where they become only a memory, or they can finally confront the fear that has controlled them and speak honestly. They know that if they come forward, they cannot expect you to be the same person you were before. You have learned too much. You have grown too much. You now understand that love must eventually become visible through action. And they are realizing something equally powerful: loving you quietly from a distance may eventually become the same thing as losing you. My beloved child, keep your heart open, but keep your eyes open too. Let truth arrive naturally. Let actions reveal intention. Let your spiritual awakening lead you toward peace instead of obsession. Because you thought your soulmate didn't love you, but what they are beginning to understand about why they ran from this connection is far deeper than you imagined. And there is still one confession they have been holding inside, one truth about the exact moment they realized they could actually lose you forever. And when that truth finally comes to the surface, everything between you could look completely different. Wait, because the confession they have been holding back begins with something you never saw coming. My beloved child, your soulmate did not simply wake up one morning and realize they missed you. This awakening was building quietly, layer by layer, every time they tried to convince themselves that the connection was over and discovered that their heart refused to cooperate. They thought time would make everything easier. They thought distance would weaken what they felt. They thought if they stopped talking about you, stopped checking for you, stopped replaying memories, the emotional pull would eventually disappear. But listen to this, because the exact opposite began happening. The more they tried to suppress the connection, the more certain moments started returning with unusual clarity. They remembered the way you made them feel safe without forcing them to explain themselves. They remembered conversations that seemed ordinary at the time but now feel irreplaceable. They remembered a certain look in your eyes, a certain softness in your voice, a certain moment when you gave them more understanding than they believed they deserved. Your heart needs this right now, because the truth they have been avoiding is becoming simple. They did not pull away because you meant too little. Somewhere inside them, they pulled away because you began to mean too much. Don't scroll, because one memory has been haunting them more than all the others. There was a moment when they sensed you beginning to emotionally protect yourself. Maybe you became quieter. Maybe your energy changed. Maybe you stopped asking the same questions because you were tired of receiving unclear answers. Maybe you stopped trying to convince them to open up. At the time, they may have told themselves that everything was fine, but something inside them noticed the shift. And now that moment keeps coming back because they finally understand what it meant. You were not playing games. You were becoming tired. You were learning that love cannot survive forever on possibility alone. My beloved child, this message is for you because your soulmate is beginning to understand that there is a difference between someone being patient and someone waiting endlessly. They may have mistaken your kindness for permanence. They may have assumed that because your heart was deep, you would always leave the emotional door unlocked for them. But now they are realizing that even the most loving heart eventually learns how to protect its peace. Listen closely, because the universe may have been showing you this shift before you had words for it. Perhaps you began noticing 111 when you were thinking about starting over. Maybe 222 appeared when you were questioning whether this connection could ever become balanced. Perhaps 444 showed up during difficult nights when you needed reassurance that you could stand on your own. And maybe 555 appeared as your life started changing in ways you did not expect. My beloved child, let these numbers be reminders rather than promises. They do not have to mean that your soulmate will arrive tomorrow or that every thought you have is a prediction. Sometimes spiritual signs appear meaningful because they invite you to notice your own transformation. You are no longer looking at love exactly the way you did before. You are beginning to realize that destiny is not about losing yourself inside another person. Divine connection should call you into greater truth, greater self-respect, and greater emotional maturity. And while that awakening has been unfolding inside you, your soulmate has been confronting a painful realization of their own. Here is the part they never expected to admit. They are afraid someone else may love you correctly before they learn how. My beloved child, don't scroll. That possibility has started hitting them differently. They imagine someone else recognizing your loyalty immediately instead of taking it for granted. They imagine someone else asking how your day was and actually listening. They imagine someone else noticing the small things about you, respecting your heart, and giving you the kind of reassurance they were too afraid to offer. This is not about ownership, because you belong to no one. It is about realization. Your soulmate is beginning to understand that what they failed to appreciate may not remain available forever. And this thought has been creating an urgency they cannot easily ignore. For the first time, they are not only asking, "Do I have feelings for them?" They are asking, "What if my fear causes me to lose them permanently?" That question is heavier because it requires responsibility. It forces them to confront the possibility that silence is also a choice, and every choice creates consequences. Something shifted inside them the moment they realized you could be happy without them. Listen to this. For a long time, they may have believed that your connection was so strong that nothing could truly change it. They assumed the emotional bond would always be waiting somewhere in the background. But now they are beginning to understand that human beings grow. Hearts heal. People change. Someone who once desperately wanted an explanation can eventually reach a point where peace becomes more important than answers. And that is the version of you they are beginning to fear meeting. Not because you are becoming cold, but because you are becoming whole. My beloved child, your heart needs this right now. Healing does not mean you stopped caring. Healing means your happiness is no longer completely dependent on another person making the decision you hoped they would make. That shift is powerful. It changes the entire dynamic because now your soulmate must decide whether they want to stay hidden behind fear or step into honesty before the opportunity looks completely different. Pay attention, because their spiritual awakening is forcing them to look at patterns they once blamed on timing. Maybe they used to tell themselves, "It was just bad timing." Maybe they believed life was too complicated. Maybe they blamed work, distance, responsibilities, or circumstances. Some of those things may have been real, but lately they have been asking a harder question: how much of this was circumstance, and how much was me being afraid? That question opened something uncomfortable. They began noticing a pattern of withdrawing whenever something became emotionally serious. They began remembering past situations where they protected themselves by creating distance before another person could reject them. And suddenly they saw the same pattern appearing in your connection. My beloved child, this is where real awakening begins. Not when someone sees a sign and assumes everything will magically change, but when they become willing to see the truth about themselves. Your soulmate is beginning to understand that if they want a different future, they cannot keep repeating the same emotional habits. Don't look away now, because there is one thing they deeply regret about how they treated this connection. They regret making you question what was real. They know there were moments when you could feel something genuine between you, and then their behavior made you doubt your own perception. They may have given warmth and then withdrawn it. They may have opened up one day and closed down the next. They may have acted protective, jealous, tender, or emotionally present and then pretended none of it meant anything. My beloved child, that inconsistency likely hurt because it left you trying to solve a puzzle that was never yours to solve. Your soulmate is beginning to understand that they should have communicated instead of leaving you to interpret their fear. And now, as they replay those moments, regret is beginning to replace avoidance. They are seeing that you did not need perfection from them. You needed honesty. Your heart needs this right now. You were never supposed to carry both sides of this connection. Listen to this carefully. You could love them, support them, understand them, and even pray for them, but you could not do their emotional work for them. You could not force them to become ready. You could not heal every wound from their past simply by loving them harder. And if you tried, you may have ended up exhausted. My beloved child, this message is reminding you that love does not require you to become someone's therapist, rescuer, or emotional waiting room. If your soulmate wants this connection, they must meet you in it. They must take responsibility for their own healing. They must communicate. They must choose courage. Spiritual connection can inspire growth, but growth still requires participation. And your soulmate is finally beginning to see that no amount of hidden love can replace visible effort. Here is where things become even more intense. They may already be planning how to break the silence. Don't scroll. They have imagined different ways of reaching out. Something casual. Something honest. Something simple like, "How have you been?" But every version feels too small compared with what they really want to say. Because beneath the simple message is a much larger confession: I was afraid. I cared more than I admitted. I handled this badly. I thought distance would protect me, but it only showed me what losing you could feel like. My beloved child, whether they actually say those exact words is impossible to know, but the emotional theme behind them is becoming harder for them to ignore. They want to explain why their behavior did not match their feelings. They want you to understand that their silence came from fear, but they also know that explanation alone may not be enough anymore. Listen closely, because they are starting to understand that you may not respond the way the old version of you would have. This realization scares them. Once, they may have believed that all they needed to do was return and you would immediately open your heart. Now they are not so sure. They can sense that your standards have changed. Your spiritual awakening has taught you to ask deeper questions. Is this person emotionally available? Do their actions match their words? Can they communicate when things become uncomfortable? Does this connection create peace as well as passion? My beloved child, these questions are not signs that you have become difficult. They are signs that you have matured. And this is exactly why your soulmate knows that if they come back, they cannot return with the same behavior. Something must be different. The universe may be placing one lesson in front of both of you at the same time: choose truth over fear. For your soulmate, that may mean telling you how they genuinely feel even without knowing what your response will be. For you, it may mean admitting what you need and refusing to shrink those needs just because the connection feels powerful. Don't scroll, because this is where soulmate energy becomes less about fantasy and more about transformation. Maybe you met this person partly to awaken each other. Maybe they showed you where you were willing to settle for ambiguity because you were afraid to lose the connection. Maybe you showed them where they used emotional distance as protection. And now both of you are being asked to choose differently. My beloved child, destiny can open a door, but people still have to decide whether they are willing to walk through it with honesty. Something about 222 may feel especially meaningful right now, because balance is becoming the central lesson. Listen to this. Love cannot be one person reaching while the other hides. It cannot be one person giving reassurance while the other gives confusion. Balance means both people showing up emotionally. It means your soulmate no longer expects you to carry the relationship while they remain protected behind uncertainty. If 444 keeps appearing, let it remind you that a stable relationship needs a stable foundation. If 555 keeps appearing, let it remind you that change can be uncomfortable but necessary. And if 1111 catches your eye when you are thinking about this connection, use that moment to ask yourself, am I choosing what aligns with my highest peace? My beloved child, spiritual signs can help you reflect, but your future will be shaped by the quality of your choices. Don't scroll, because there is another emotional truth your soulmate has been struggling to accept: they miss the version of themselves that existed around you. Maybe they felt softer around you. More hopeful. More understood. More willing to imagine a future. Maybe your presence brought out a side of them that had been buried under responsibility, fear, or disappointment. When they lost closeness with you, they did not only miss you, they began missing who they were becoming around you. That realization can be powerful. It can make someone understand that meaningful love is not only about receiving affection. Sometimes a connection shows us a version of ourselves we are capable of becoming. Your soulmate may be realizing that you did not simply fill a space in their life. You challenged them to open a part of their heart they had forgotten how to use. But hear this clearly, because your destiny does not depend on whether they become that person. My beloved child, you are still allowed to move forward. You are still allowed to choose peace. You are still allowed to say, I understand why you were afraid, but I need consistency now. Compassion and boundaries can exist together. Love and discernment can exist together. You can hear someone's apology without instantly restoring their access to your heart. You can forgive without repeating the same cycle. You can believe a connection was meaningful while still requiring proof that it can become healthy. Your heart needs this right now because spiritual messages should never make you abandon your wisdom. If your soulmate wants another chance, let them show that their awakening has changed their behavior. And now we reach the revelation they have been most afraid to face. There is something they did, said, or failed to do during the period of distance that they believe may have changed your view of them permanently. Maybe they chose pride when they should have chosen honesty. Maybe they allowed someone else's opinion to influence them. Maybe they acted like they did not care because they wanted to appear strong. Maybe they watched you struggle with uncertainty and remained silent because they believed there would always be time to explain later. Whatever it was, they now realize that later is not guaranteed. Don't scroll. This is where regret becomes a decision point. They can either continue carrying that secret quietly or finally admit what was happening beneath their behavior. My beloved child, something tells me that the next movement in this connection will be about accountability, not just emotion. Your soulmate already knows they miss you. That is not the biggest revelation anymore. The bigger question is whether they are willing to take responsibility for how they handled that love. Listen to this, because real reconciliation, if it happens, cannot be built on, I missed you, alone. It needs, I understand what I did. It needs, I know why it hurt you. It needs, I am willing to act differently. This is the standard your awakening is leading you toward. You are not asking for flawless love. You are asking for emotionally present love. Stay with this message, because the biggest cliffhanger is still unfolding. There may be one person, one conversation, or one unexpected event that recently pushed your soulmate over the edge emotionally. Something made them realize that you may truly be moving into a new chapter. And after that moment, they could no longer hide behind the belief that there would always be more time. My beloved child, they started imagining what they would say if this were their last opportunity to tell you the truth. They began separating excuses from honesty. They began seeing that the real confession is not simply, "I love you." It is, "I loved you while acting like I didn't, because I was terrified of what loving you would require from me." And now they know that if they want a different outcome, they have to become a different version of themselves. Before you leave this message, remember this one thing: you are not waiting for love, you are becoming ready for love that can meet you fully. Don't scroll past your own transformation. The signs, the angel numbers, the dreams, the emotional pulls, and the synchronicities may feel intense, but the strongest sign is the way you are beginning to choose yourself without hardening your heart. That is growth. That is awakening. And if your soulmate truly belongs in your next chapter, they will need to meet that growth with their own. Because the truth is no longer hidden from them. They know what they feel. They know what fear cost them. They know you may not wait forever. But there is still one final secret behind why they became distant at the exact moment the connection became strongest, and when that secret finally comes out, it may explain the one part of this story you have never been able to understand.